Hello and welcome to My Dad the Bobby, episode 3. Join me, Emma Brown, as I interview my dad, Paul Brown, about his time working as a police officer, detective, and private investigator. With over 30 years in the industry and heaps of stories and experience, Dad will be talking about what it was like in the police force, solving crimes and catching criminals. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy the show. Hi Dad, how are you?
I'm good, Ems. Good to see you. I'm not with the cold now. I'm good.
Yeah, I know, you sound
hear me
much
clearer.
better. I'm very glad.
Oh, good.
So on this episode, we're going to be talking about being a police detective and interrogating people and what it's like being in the interrogation room. So shall we jump straight into it?
Go for it.
Okay, so firstly, maybe you could tell us how you became a detective, what that training process is like, and how do they make sure you have the right stuff to be a detective?
Well, when you first start in the police, you have to start as a probationary constable. So you're in uniform, and that has to be for a minimum of 2 years. But then you can start to, you pick up skills along the way there, and you can start to specialise if you wish to, if you apply for this thing. Some people don't. Some people are quite happy to be a uniform PC for, as long as it takes. But I was never really interested in traffic stuff. But I was interested in crime and detection of crime. And also I like the culture of other detectives that I'd seen and worked with. I wanted to be in that lifestyle rather than on the traffic, sort of general policing duty stuff. So then you have to wait for vacancies to arise and then you apply for them. And if you, obviously they would look through your previous work on crime files you've submitted, starting from just basic attending burglary scenes and what you do and what your processes are and arresting people and interviewing them. And they work out, you have to sit a board to see whether you could go into CID. And I applied for an interview and boarded, passed my board. And when places come up, they ask you to you come and join the CID. And then obviously within CID, as time goes on, there's other specialisms that come out of that same sort of background. So subsequently I went on to the drug squad. I went on to the National Criminal Intelligence Service, went on to the Regional Crime Squad, but they are all crime-based situations. So I was actually only ever in uniform for about 4 years. And the rest of it I was in plainclothes CID work.
Okay. So there's a popular TV show called 24 Hours in Police Custody. Can you explain to the audience why people can only be held for 24 hours and what police detectives need to figure out in that time?
Well, I've never actually seen that programme, by the way.
Oh, really?
I'm aware of it.
Yeah,
I'm aware of it. And in fact, I think some of it was actually done in Cambridgeshire.
Yeah,
and I knew some of the officers that were on it.
Oh, wow.
So the legislation states that once you've arrested someone, in the main, you have 24 hours to either charge, bail, or release them without charge, etc. That's just the law. There are, in cases of serious crime, that you can apply for an extension. By that means you have to take someone back to the court. You can get sued. This is a long time ago for me, so you have to forgive me a little bit. But you can apply for a superintendent's authority to get an extension. I think that's, I don't know, is it 6 or 12 hours now? I can't remember, it's so far back. But after that period of time, if you're still looking to interview or there are further inquiries going on in the background, then you need to go to court and make an application for the court to give you an extra extension on his or her time in custody. And at the end of that period of time, there is another process where you can take them back to court for a further extension. But you must really acknowledge that this is in the case of serious major crime.
Yeah.
This is not for someone who's allegedly stolen a bike, or I'm not saying that's not a crime, but, serious crime, murder, manslaughter, rape. It's really serious crime. So you can only make those applications to the court to get further extension in custody. But in my time, most of the stuff towards, particularly latterly towards the end of my career, I was only dealing ever in murders, so that was serious crime, and that's why we often had to take them back to court to get an extension into their custody time limits. And of course, you've got lawyers in the background trying to get their client out, released. So if you've got a major inquiry on the go, you've got a lot of detectives working outside trying to gain the evidence, witness statements, forensic evidence, fast-tracking forensic work in order to get enough evidence to charge. You can release someone on bail in order for them to come back and appear at a later time, or you can put bail conditions on them by taking them to court, and the court would say, you know, you're not allowed to curfew between 7 p.m, 7 a.m, things like that. But basically, in the main, Joe Public, who gets arrested for the average shoplifting, bike theft, criminal damage, you'll have 24 hours, and they're normally dealt with within that time and gone. And you also, during that time, have to allow them 8 hours sleep, you have to have them rest periods, they have to have time for meals. So although you've got 24 hours, you haven't got 24 hours because you've got to allow them 8 hours sleep, they've got to allow consultation with solicitors, they've got to have their meals time. Some religions, you have to give them time for worship, which is all eating into your 24-hour clock. So you have to get on, pretty much have the evidence before you bring someone in, really.
And how important is the help of the public in investigations? And is this less important now we have CCTV, or is it still of major importance?
It is still of major importance. The police, they do police by consent, which means the public approve and help in what they do. That has deteriorated over the last, I don't know, certainly since I retired, that's deteriorated. The public don't want to get involved so much. But it's essential because they're the eyes and ears out there. They see things, they hear things, they're aware of things. And that's why programs such as Crime Stoppers and these other TV programs that ask for public help in identifying someone. You know, when you see a man in a hoodie, but it's a blue hoodie and he's got white Adidas training shoes and it's seen at a certain location, there are people that will know that individual by looking at him on screen.
Yeah.
So it's essential. Public help is essential. Scientific evidence has come on a lot. DNA evidence, other forensic stuff, that's come on leaps and bounds. But you still need a starting point. You still need a witness who says, I saw a man in a car do this, and a witness statement, and then it goes from there, and then you can start your inquiries progressively.
Cool. So now we're going to talk about interrogation, and I think that's a big part of your job for many years was interrogating people.
Yeah.
So when you go into the interrogation room ready to do an interview, what are you thinking, what's going on in your mind, and how much sort of background do you have on that person before going into that room?
Rather than interrogation, I prefer the word interview.
Okay, interview.
Interrogation sounds like we're putting lights in their face and pulling their fingernails out by the roots.
Yeah.
We're not. It's an interview.
Yeah.
It's an interview. There is a lot of planning, particularly in serious crime. Once someone's in custody, there is a lot of background work that has to go on prior to interview. I would often spend, 4 or 5 hours planning an interview before I even spoke to anyone. And all of that time is a process. It used to be called the peace interview, where you get someone to go through the process, get them to lay down an account of what they did, where they were. Bear in mind, a lot of people won't even talk to you. A lot of people go no comment.
Yeah.
Normally advised by a solicitor to go no comment. But they will sometimes go no comment of their own accord. And then you still have the right to ask the question, regardless of the fact they say they don't want to talk to you and it's no comment. You still have the right to ask those questions. The reason they do that, when some person says, I'm going no comment all the way through this interview, the police officer will ask the questions anyway, because it avoids the issue of finally getting to court, whereby a solicitor will stand up and say, well, had the police officer have asked my client, he would have said this, but he didn't ask the question.
Yeah.
So the police go through the questions anyway, regardless if they're going to sit into a no interview comment. But the planning and preparation is really important before an interview. And basically, with regards to serious crime, there's only certain officers that are allowed to interview for major crime. The interviewing process of someone who's brought in for shoplifting, or which is theft, by the way. Shoplifting, you're still charged sections 1 to 7 of the Theft Act. Everyone refers to it as shoplifting, but it is
It's
theft.
theft, yeah.
Okay, as you will be aware.
Yeah.
And
Working at a co-op. No,
yeah.
I'm not a thief, by the way. That's not what Dad
No,
meant.
no.
I work
She
at a
works
co-op.
at the co-op.
Oh my god.
And she's given
Imagine.
statements before about people that have stolen from the co-op. Yeah, it's commonly referred to as shoplifting, but it isn't. It's theft. And so when you're a junior officer and you're doing this everyday routine stuff, and for driving offences, etc., everyone has to be interviewed once they're in custody. But when it comes to major crime, serious crime, where it's massively important to get it right, there's only certain trained officers that are allowed to do it. And I was one of those officers that was allowed to do it, and I loved it. It was great, yeah. I forgot what the original question was.
Me too. Let's move on.
Okay.
What do you do if someone is going no comment, no comment, no comment over and over? Like, you can continue asking those questions,
Yeah.
but would you do anything else to try and get the answers out of them?
Well, you can. Obviously, you're aware. You should have done your homework and read the witness statements that relate to that person. How did you get that person in front of you, sitting in front of you? Something has led me to arrest them and put them in that chair, or someone else has arrested them and brought them in the chair. We haven't just dragged him off the street on a
Yeah.
night. There is something that has linked us to believe he or she is responsible. So obviously you can put that evidence to them. You know, you were seen by a witness leaving the house or getting into a car, or, you know, we searched your house and we found this bag of drugs, or, you know, we've seized your clothing, and from that broken window we've found fragments of glass in your trousers.
Yeah.
Or, you know, because with every crime, as soon as you're at a scene, if you're touching something or in the vicinity of a scene, somewhere along there will be some forensic evidence on you, whether it be glass fragments, paint fragments off of a car, hairs, human hairs, dog hairs, animal hairs. There is some kind of contact. There will be forensic evidence on you. And in this day and age, forensics is so good. It's so good that if there's a human hair on your clothing that puts you at the scene, they will find it.
Yeah.
They will find it. So, yeah, so you put all that to them. You still get people go no comment when it's black and white.
Yeah.
You know, they'll swear black's white.
Yeah.
But that's fine. That's fine. And I always used to say to them, I hear what you're saying, but it's not me you've got to convince.
Yeah.
It's the court. I don't care what you say to me because I don't believe you anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't care what you say. It's not going to make a slightest bit of difference to my day.
Yeah.
But you've got to convince the court that what you're saying, you're going to hope they believe you.
Yeah.
And if it was so outrageous, they used to sit and say no comment or whatever, or it wasn't me there. I mean, you'll be working at the co-op like you have done in the past. You'll see people in shoplifting, CCTV, theft, shoplifting. You'll see them on CCTV. It's them.
It's black and white.
It's black and white. And they'll sit in there and say, it's not me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. We'll charge you and we'll let the court decide.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I don't know how much you can tell me about this, but do police have specific tactics to get information out of people, such as sort of the good cop, bad cop tactic, where you send in different people and, you know?
I think a lot of that is anecdotal.
Yeah.
You do have, that could be confused with people's different way they interview people. You know, some person seen as a baddie, some person seen as a good guy.
Yeah.
If you can show empathy or sympathy, some people appeal to that.
Yeah.
So that's where the good cop, bad cop things, you've got one person being quite aggressive, asking searching questions, and you've got someone who's being empathetic. Sometimes that works, but that's down to an individual's interview technique. We would always interview in twos.
Yeah.
You always interview in twos, because also, while that one person is talking and interviewing, you can't think of what else you should be thinking, where the person sitting beside you is making notes, listening and thinking, oh, I'm going to ask that question, I'm going to ask that question.
Yeah.
The big no-no in an interview between two police officers was that you don't interrupt each other.
Yeah.
Because an officer might be going down one line of inquiry, leading him into what he thinks is going to put the guy in a problem. And then you don't want someone cutting in and asking a question that takes you off at a different angle. So the interviewing officers would say, right, for the moment, I've finished. I'm going to hand you over to my colleague. And then they would go. But the good guy, bad cop thing, I think it may be true in some cases, but generally it's because someone shows a bit of empathy or their technique is different. That's all. Yeah.
And would you say there's any like patterns in that? For example, like, in terms of, you dealt with a lot of murder primarily in your time.
Yeah.
And were there examples of, maybe a woman would appeal more to that empathic side, or maybe a man would, maybe a man, if it was a woman interviewing, he would appeal more to that? Or were there any patterns, or not really?
There's no patterns, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Some people do. Some people feel relief of getting it off their shoulders.
Yeah.
Because they're carrying it as a burden.
Yeah.
And they know the odds are probably stacked against them.
Yeah.
And some people, for sometimes, you can just see that physical relief by making an admission. Mm-hmm. But there's not really any, there's no value. I understand from the suspect's point of view, there's no real value to them saying, yes, I did it, it was me who stabbed them.
Right.
And I intended to kill them.
Yeah.
The only time that does come to a value to them is when they get to court, because they've pleaded guilty at an early stage, they've made full admissions, and the judge will take that into account.
Yeah.
The judge will always penalise someone who has lied throughout and tried to cheat and deceive and gone not guilty.
Yeah.
And then is subsequently found guilty. They will always get a harsher sentence.
Yeah.
Because the judge give them what's the word I'm looking for? They give her a lesser sentence once they've, yes, it was me, I did it, I'm very sorry, and show some, upset that they've done it, remorse. So that's the thing, I suppose, with that.
Yeah. And in terms of interviewing people, what did you find was the most difficult type of person to interview? Is there anything that sticks out that you go, oh, this type of person or with this personality made them really difficult to interview, or this wasn't a nice interview?
I was never good. I didn't do this very often, but I was never very good and didn't want to interview child sex offenders.
Yeah.
Because for me personally, it's too
emotional.
And upsetting. And at the time, you and your brother were quite young.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I just couldn't. I didn't want to do it. Yeah. And I told the bosses I didn't want to do it. And in fact, we now have specialised officers that do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of those haven't got children.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they can probably distance themselves emotionally from it. But with your average, let's face it, 80% of them, 85, 90% would be males.
Yeah.
In fact, I do recall interviewing one woman who stabbed her husband to death. Other than that, I don't remember interviewing another woman for murder, but I've interviewed numerous male people.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any problems interviewing people for serious crime.
Yeah.
And it didn't weigh heavy on my mind either. And when people used to say to me, how do you deal with it when you get home, and how do you switch off? I never really had that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this is my job, this is what I do. I'm going home, I'm going to bed, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
But I have in the past, long time ago, tried to interview sex offenders, and it's not my bag, it's not what I enjoy. No. I find I can't, emotionally, it's too difficult.
Yeah, it's too awful.
It's too awful to do it, and so there's other people that are far better at it than me. And the bosses in the police, they're not, they're realists. The people don't want to do certain things, and there are people, they put the best people in, which is good, which is where it should be, professional.
And leading on from that, I suppose, have you ever had someone in the interrogation room that has tried to intimidate you or make you uncomfortable, either in your time, obviously you've got to be careful on what you say, but either in your time working for the police or the CID, has there ever been someone is trying to make you feel intimidated? Yeah,
there are people that try, but they're few and far between, because at the end of the day, we hold all the aces in the pack, don't we? He's in custody, he's locked up, he's in a cell, he's not going anywhere until we say he is going anywhere. So you can intimidate and threaten all you like, but what are you going to do? You're not going to not going to open the door and let you go. So
No. What's the point?
what's the point? And most people don't. Most people are quite calm and collected. They get
Yeah.
upset.
Yeah.
They get upset because, especially when you're getting near the truth,
Yeah.
and start feeding evidence in them, particularly on stuff like DNA. Like you can fast track DNA stuff now. So if people say it wasn't me, you can have them in custody 24 hours where he says it isn't me, you got the wrong man. You got to fast track the DNA, get him to court, get an extension on him, bring him back into view. Oh, he's still saying it's not you, it's not me, it's not me. That's just been to the lab. These are the results. That's your blood.
Yeah.
That's your semen. Okay.
God. Yeah.
What we're saying now then, is it
Yeah.
still not you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the chance is 1 in 10 billion. So, well, you know, do you still want to go? It's not you, or what?
Yeah.
Should we talk about it?
Yeah.
And then they get upset and frustrated, and
Yeah.
in the end, those people plead guilty because there isn't an alternative.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you worked for the CID and you were interviewing people who wanted to give information to the police, was that ever tense or awkward or uncomfortable, or was there sort of a mutual understanding that you were trying to help each other out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, people who give information they come in various formats. One is your straightforward witness who says, "I saw this," and I will give you a witness statement signed, and you can present that to the court. A lot of those statements are what they call Section 9 statements, where they're just entered into the court, the defence and the prosecution accept it, and they don't even appear as a witness. Their statement is just read out in court. Or it comes from informants, which I was with the National Criminal Intelligence Service dealing with informants on a daily basis for 6 years. Informants have different reasons for doing things. Informants do it for revenge, because most informants are criminals themselves.
Yep.
Because you don't get the village vicar come and say to you, I've got this information about a drug dealer.
Yeah.
That's not the way it works. That's not the way of the world. They're people who are criminals themselves. Most people you have a good rapport with. You build up a professional relationship. They're either doing it for revenge. Some do it for the kudos of it. Some people do it for money. There's various. Some people do it to take out the opposition.
Yeah.
So don't ever be thinking they're doing it because they're a good-natured human being.
Yeah.
Most of them will do it because there's something in it for them.
Yeah.
But there are good, solid, reliable, trusted methods of handling informants. It's not just a case you turn up, you see what he says, and you act on it. Everything is documented. There are guidelines about authorities, when you can see them, where you see them. Any money that's paid out to them is documented, invoiced. That's paid out by a high-ranking police officer who'll be with you, me. So, so there's and information comes from various sources. Information comes from CCTV. What else? I mean, without thinking, information comes from forensic evidence. There's all these sort of methods of obtaining evidence and information. But always be cautious of informants, because they're 9 times out of 10 not doing it because they're well-meaning citizens.
Yeah.
They're doing it because there's something in them for them.
Yeah.
So, but some of them are difficult to handle, but some of them you build a really good rapport with. You're like friends, but never let them become friends.
Yeah.
Because you almost must keep that distance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just going back to regular police interviews for a moment, obviously people lie in interrogations and the solicitor is there to guide them. So what stage does a solicitor enter that situation, and what do they normally say to them to help them out, or, what's that kind of process like of working with a solicitor with a criminal?
So when anyone's brought into custody, they have their rights given to them. They're allowed to make one phone call, they're allowed to contact someone, they're allowed to legal advice, free legal advice. So a lot of them will go down that road to have free legal advice. So we're not allowed to, once they're arrested and put in the cell, we're not allowed to speak to them until they've sought legal advice.
Okay, yeah.
So we can't just go in and say, the only time the police can go in as if it's a case of life or death, i.e. if we don't speak to you in the next 3 minutes, someone's going to lose their life.
Right, okay.
So that's when you are allowed to override that. But in general, run-of-the-mill things, 99.9% of the time, you won't speak to them until they've been allowed to consult with the solicitor. Depending what the offence is and depending on the individual, most of them will answer no comment, or a lot of them will answer no comment, advised by a solicitor to answer no comment, because they can't necessarily improve their situation, but they could potentially make it a lot worse by speaking to the police without legal advice, etc. The police have to have a relationship with solicitors. In the main, it's a professional relationship. We're on different sides of the fence, but you respect each other. They've got their job to do. The police have their job to do. There are clashes when solicitors act beyond the legal duty that they're meant to do, which I've experienced before, where solicitors have actually gone out and done something which is to hinder the investigation.
Oh, wow.
I've had that a few times. And there are these issues that are really difficult.
Yeah.
But in the main, it's a professional relationship. And because of most officers will work in the same police station day in, they meet the same solicitors day in, day in. So you have to have that professional relationship. There are fallouts in the interview room. It's frustrating for police officers when they advise their client to go no comment. But police officers should be professional enough to know that's going to happen and work around it.
Yeah.
Not many people come and say, yes, it was me, I did do it, and I'm guilty.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention any names, but I did actually interview a guy. I've just got to be careful how I word this, not to give the guy away. I did interview a guy who attacked his wife and mother-in-law with a hammer. The mother-in-law died. The wife did survive. But he was a Christian, and he came in and admitted it straight away and said he was guilty.
Oh, my gosh.
And he gave us every in-depth detail about how he did it and how he planned it.
Oh, my God.
And the interview, it was the shortest. He was actually, I always said, he was the nicest murderer I've ever met.
Yeah.
Because he just came in, was sobbing,
God.
so upset, gave all tell us everything we need to know. And it was a really short interview because you didn't really have to ask him that many questions.
Wow.
The only thing to ask was, did you intend to do it? And if once he said, yes, I did intend to do it and I did intend to murder them, case proven, intent.
Yeah. And that was simply just because he had such guilt and like because of his faith as well.
Because of his faith and because of his guilt and the circumstances he had been put in by his own wife and family. And it was a long time of frustration. I can't say too much because it will become obvious, or it could become obvious who that is, and that wouldn't be fair. But and he would have received a life sentence, but with a minimum. They would have a tariff. The judge gives them a tariff, for example. So when the only sentence you can give for murder by statute is life imprisonment, but that's when you see by statute they can also give you a lesser term, a minimum tariff. So, I don't know, 17 years, 15 years or whatever. Yeah, that was a difficult one. It was interesting, but I did actually feel quite sorry for him.
Yeah.
It was so through frustration that he did it. And he was actually a very articulate guy who's got 3 degrees in different skills. He's a very clever man. Very clever man. And actually, I know this sounds weird, he's a really nice man.
Yeah.
But he was pushed beyond the edge and attacked his mother-in-law and wife.
Oh my goodness. And I suppose that also doesn't happen very often, so it's sort of a shock when it does happen that you almost feel sorry for someone in that setting or scenario.
Yeah. I mean, most murders are done by someone who knows the victim.
Yeah.
There's not a particularly high percentage of murders that take place by someone who's unknown to them. It can be gang-related, drug-related, domestic-related, family stuff, pride, whatever. So most murders are committed by someone who knows them. But there are the odd person you have a certain amount of sympathy and empathy for, and he was definitely one of them. And he was, if I was to see him here now, I'd happily shake his hand and talk to him because he's actually a nice human being.
Yeah.
But that was the way it was.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Dad. I'm out of questions, so we'll finish this episode there and move on to the next one.
Cool.
So thank you, everyone, very much for listening. Dad, have you got anything to say? Any final words?
No, any further questions, just go with it.
Just drop us a line at mydadthebobby@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram at mydadthebobby, and we also have a YouTube channel where we post all these episodes too, so you can go find us on there as well. All right. Thank you very much. Bye.